Excerpt from Starlog Presents SF Actors and Actresses Platinum Edition Volume Number 2, featuring a 1994 copyright date. The article Heroic Stature, written by Frank Sanello. As desperate as she was for work, Weaver still had a mind of her own. When she was offered the role of Ed Asner's protege on TV's Lou Grant, ultimately portrayed by Lindsay Kelsey, Weaver turned it down flat. "I didn't want to play the same character for 3 to 5 years," she says firmly. Her gamble paid off when a year later, she was offered her first film and starring role as Lieutenant Ellen Ripley in Alien. The role was originally conceived for a man, as all action films are, but when the producers saw the statuesque actress, they rewrote the role expressly for her. Modestly, Weaver downplays the effect her imposing presence had on the producers. "It was a commercial decision," she explains. "The producers thought, here's this movie about 6 guys landing on a planet. What can we do to make it a little more interesting to a wider audience?" Contradicting press accounts that the part was changed specifically for Weaver, she also insists they made the decision to make the hero woman long before I got the role. While off screen, Weaver's strength comes through. The actress was promised a part of the profits for Ghostbusters 1984. When Columbia claimed the movie hadn't turned a profit, she threatened an audit and a lawsuit. To gain her services for the sequel, the studio anteed up and offered her a flat fee of $1 million for Ghostbusters 2. Weaver's fame has made her a natural target for autograph hounds, but if they want her to sign on the dotted line, they have to pay. She charges $1 for her signature and has collected thousands of dollars. But greed isn't the problem. She donates the money to AIDS research. Nobody refuses. Some people even say, here's $20. I got the idea from Celeste Holm, who solicits 50-cent donations in exchange for her signature. Celeste gives the money to UNICEF. She told me she raised $20,000 in 20 years. It changed the whole experience of giving out autographs. It stops it from being about a celebrity and becomes 2 people sharing.
In 1979, we discovered in space, no one can hear you scream. In 1992, we will discover on Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
Excerpt from the June 1992 cover-dated Premiere Magazine. From the Cameos section, written by Shahram Victory. Comic book tie-ins, Mike Richardson. Mike Richardson has created a home away from Hollywood for your favorite screen cyborgs, extraterrestrials, and heroes. Everyone from the Terminator to the Predator to young Indiana Jones can be found on the slick and stylized pages of Dark Horse Comics, the Milwaukee, Oregon-based publishing company Richardson founded in 1986. This summer, Dark Horse will introduce 2 new titles along with their movie counterparts. Alien³ and RoboCop 3. 6 feet 9 inches tall, soft-spoken, and with a serious entrepreneurial bent, Richardson was a commercial artist and amateur league basketball player when he used a $2,000 credit card advance to open a store specializing in comics and illustrated books. Although he was planning to hang out in the back of the tiny shop and write a children's book, the comics end of the business took off. Discouraged by the quality of some of the product and what he calls industry conditions left over from the 40s and 50s, Richardson soon began Dark Horse, a creator-friendly firm that attracted top talent by avoiding bureaucracy and letting artists control the rights to their own creations. You can push the edge a lot more at Dark Horse, says writer Stephen Grant, a 14-year veteran of the business, citing his own Badlands, a crime series based on the JFK assassination. Dark Horse emerged with a string of unlikely characters like Paul Chadwick's Concrete, a congressional speechwriter who, although transformed into a 2,000-pound cement creature, is still besieged by the mundane problems of everyday life. Producers became interested in some of Dark Horse's titles, and Richardson began commuting to Los Angeles to discuss film adaptations. These trips also yielded the basis for Dark Horse's biggest success to date, licensing characters from the movies. There are 500 comic titles out in any given month, Richardson says. You're fighting a losing battle going up against Spider-Man and Superman with somebody no one has heard of. We wanted characters people don't get enough of. Although most of the first issues in a movie series are adapted from the screenplay, after the imaginations of Richardson and his staff take over, we write our own movie comics as if they're sequels. We don't live off what's already there, he says. Some of the more far-out results of their extrapolations are such monster matchup as the mega-selling comic Aliens vs. Predator. The most pyrotechnic blind date is yet to come this summer, timed to the tentative release of the film RoboCop 3. Dark Horse will present Frank Miller's vision of the man-machine in a pitched battle against its reigning cyborg, the Terminator. That type of creative thinking has earned Dark Horse as much as 10% of the comic market, the largest bite any independent publisher has ever taken out of the DC and Marvel-dominated business, as well as kudos from the film industry, which benefits from the quality of the tie-ins. They're perfectionists and extremely creative as a group, says Albert Ovadiah, head of 20th 20th Century Fox's licensing and marketing division, from whom Dark Horse licenses the Alien and the Predator. They capture the particular sensibility of a property. These days, an offshoot of the company, Dark Horse Entertainment, is working behind the cameras. It's co-producing Dr. Giggles and has a first-look deal with Largo Entertainment. But Richardson hasn't abandoned his original intention to write a children's book. I've done all these things just to get my own book published, he jokes. He won't reveal the plot of what he plans to call The Greatest Gift of All, but says it's about values, though presumably not the ones the Alien, Predator, and Terminator live by. The same edition also included a one-page ad. An exclusive look behind the scenes of Alien 3 is free when you buy Alien and Aliens. The must-have Alien Aliens collector set contains a limited edition video, The Making of Alien 3, available only in this one-time offer. Spectacular, never-before-released behind-the-scenes footage, the actual filming of key scenes, incredible special effects, exclusive interviews with Sigourney Weaver, the Alien creator H.R. Geiger, and others. A look back at Alien and Alien. Available May 14th, 1992, $39.98 suggested retail price. Alien 3 coming to theaters May 22nd.
I rewatched it and I was like, I don't know why because it was like one of those things where I was like debating, because I was like, I've seen Alien 3 three times now, I think. Well, maybe four if you count the work print version, because I watched it once in the theater, and that was, I know for sure, that was this bulldozed theater in the New Park Mall or whatever. After that, it was probably the quadrology or whatever when I got all those Blu-rays, because for years I just had a DVD of Alien and I think the director's cut of Aliens, with all the extended scenes, and I didn't care about the other two movies. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't gonna buy them. And then when that Blu-ray box set came out, I bought them all. I watched them all, and then a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I did a Fanholes podcast about all the Alien movies, and that was probably the last time I had watched Alien 3, because we were going to talk about all the Alien movies. And then I watched it last night. And it's like, I don't know, it's weird because this is going to be the anti-Find Your Joy podcast, sort of, right? Like we both don't like this movie, right?
It is funny that you bring this up, because I was talking to Shag last night. I'll ask people about this show and other shows, and I don't always remember the answer. And so I'd asked him, and he said, oh yeah, you already asked me about that. And the only thing he'd ever read, we've already covered. So I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Then he asked, I told him I was recording with you when I was recording, and he was like, oh, are you guys going to talk about the movie? And I'm like, I'm going to try not to talk about the movie, but I know that we can't avoid talking about the movie. And I know specifically that he's going to, we've sort of been, it's been our arc so far of this show, for as long as you've been involved with the show, is working our way toward Alien 3, and you're addressing that. This isn't a joyful comedy franchise. This is a dark sci-fi horror franchise, so people should expect that we're going to go, like you said, into the anti-Find Your Joy crowd. But it's just so funny to have the contrast between Shag being Shag, and now it's like, okay, now we're going to do this is the Empire recording, okay? This is now we're going to the dark place. Now somebody's going to get their hand chopped off.
Well, we have to do the promo. It's like, we're not about finding joy. We're about ripping awful shit to pieces.
Rolled Spine Podcast, the Fuck Your Joy network,
I get it. For me, there's certain things where that all falls in line for me, and it doesn't have to be like comedy or serious or whatever. Like there are things I can find joy in, right? And I get that. I appreciate that. I totally get it. But this, I just know this is not that. I mean, I feel like I can be analytical about things, but it's like, don't you know what amazed me? And maybe it's because I've only watched it a few times. Like that opening sequence where it's like dead, that still fucking punches me in the fucking stomach. You know what I mean? Like where you're just like, oh God. It still fucking hurts. I just can't. That's the thing. It's funny when people say well, if it was some other movie, it'd be okay. And I'm kind of like, but it's not another movie. You feel shitty the whole time. And I wasn't exactly sure what I know what we're discussing, right? But I wasn't sure what the angle, because I think the unique thing about this for me is because I was so disgusted with the movie, I'm getting flashbacks. And when I pulled up the Dark Horse adaptation, the 3-issue miniseries, I know for sure I bought the first issue of it. And I know for a fact I didn't buy the second 2 issues of it. So the first issue I've seen before.
Hold on, before you even go there. From the February 1991 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 188, the third Aliens movie, which is currently shooting in Britain, is being adapted into a series by writer Stephen Grant and painter Denis Beauvais. Unfortunately, no details can be released about the story, as the Dark Horse team have been sworn to secrecy. The team is working from a shooting script and a few storyboards. Readers are going to be really surprised by what they see in this story, commented Grant. I can't believe some of the things that are supposed to happen. Beauvais said, I'm excited by this opportunity to visualize a series before it even exists. I can bring this movie to life in my own style, giving readers a chance to compare the two versions when the movie comes out. Meanwhile, John Bolton has designed 4 new Aliens pins for Dark Horse: Alien Drone, Alien Egg, Facehugger, and Alien Ship.
Here, in a world where the sun burns cold and the wind blows colder, a visitor has come. But not by herself.
It started.
The suspense is back.
And we have no weapons of any kind?
The fear is back.
Don't look back, dude! Run as fast as you can!
And most of all, the bitch is back. Alien³
From the August 1991 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 193. We all know about the upcoming Terminator RoboCop Wars series that is being written by Frank Miller and illustrated by Walt Simonson, and will probably be out in the spring or summer of 1992. There will be a collection of Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons' Give Me Liberty series sometime in 1992. A Young Indiana Jones series will tie in with the expensive TV series of the same name. Aliens 3, Roman numerals, will be adapted by Stephen Grant and Bob Eggleton. Also, an Alien cold cast porcelain statue will be available later this year, with other figures to come. The new Star Wars series will be subtitled Dark Empire. It will be written by Rick Veitch and illustrated by Cam Kennedy. Chuck Fry and John Higgins are the creative team on The Thing from Another World, which will probably be a 4-issue series. Clive Barker's Primal will feature artwork by John Van Fleet. Doug Minch and Paul Galassi are the team behind James Bond, and there will be another Bond series by Don McGregor and Gary Caldwell.
When I was coming to this, I'm like, well, what, I don't know. I've ranted and raved about Alien 3 as a movie before, but I was like, what can I bring to this new that I haven't brought before? And I'm kind of like, well, let me look at this adaptation. I was looking at the pages as I was rewatching the movie to, because I don't like this movie. So I wanted to make it interesting for myself, and I was like, okay, so I'm sitting there watching the movie. I get the gut punch because Newton Hicks are fucking dead. But I'm sitting there like looking at the panels and the comparing it. And it's like, well, number one, right off the bat, it seems like that mandate that they couldn't use Sigourney Weaver's likeness is still like in full fucking effect, because that doesn't look like fucking Sigourney Weaver, right? It just looks like some generic person.
It's not just a Sigourney Weaver thing. There are
no,
likenesses in this comic at all. Let me put it this, as far as I can tell, the artist of this book is an African American, and the black guy looked like a white guy. They just colored differently. The people in this comic book are largely interchangeable. There's a bunch of white guys with bald heads, and then one guy who's got a little bit of hair, and then a bald chick. She has breasts, and the other ones don't. That's how you can tell them apart.
Is it weird? What is the deal with the second page? If we're going to start talking about this, is that supposed to be the queen like jumping in her mouth? Is that supposed to be a dream? What is with that second? I don't even know what's going on in that second page.
Yeah, I struggled with the panel to panel on this, and I was wondering, does he think that the alien rides inside the human and like puppet masters their limbs or something? He's like, does he not know how the alien thing works? I was also like, and of course it's swimming in water, so I guess, but wasn't that before the pod even landed on the planets? Because my understanding, Newt drowns when it lands in the water, doesn't she?
Yeah.
So had it even hit the water before the alien, the baby alien is swimming around, the infant drone, I should say, for clarity, if people aren't looking at it. There are no facehuggers present at this time, like in the Newt's Tale adaptation. This is the infant drone, after it has burst out of somebody's chest, swimming around and seeming to climb into Ripley's mouth. So I guess that's how queens are made.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, it's like what? Like what do they suggest? Like are they suggesting Newt suit got attacked by the face hugger and it came out of her and then went inside Ripley. Like, anyway, whatever they're trying to say, I don't know what it is, and it doesn't fit with established alien lore. Much like most of the panels on this page, it's super confusing. And I guess as it progresses, not only do the likenesses, like, it's funny now because I think when I first saw the film, the only person I really knew by name other than Sigourney Weaver was Charles Dutton, because I really liked and respected his work. I knew he was in this film, and I was like, oh man, like, this is gonna be great. Foolishly, right? I was like, this is gonna be great, you know? And then of course he's like, fuck that thing. That was basically like how I felt about the entire movie, you know, like, fuck that thing. You know? But when I'm looking at it now, I'm like, oh shit, there's Charles Dance and Paul McGann, and like, you know, like now I recognize because of other fandoms, right? I'm like, oh, because Game of Thrones put Charles Dance like in my brain, and because, you know, Shag has his Doctor Who fandom, and that put Paul McGann in my brain. So I'm like sitting there going, oh, well, that's fucking Doctor Who, and that's fucking Grandpa Lannister, and there is that weird aspect to it. And of course, none of these guys look remotely like the actors in this adaptation.
And it has something of a tortured history. I've got a somewhat lengthy thing to read to you right quick. But before we do that,
oh, cool.
And I don't know if you're aware, but at one point in time, Din Bouvier was going to do this adaptation.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm sure you know that the script of Alien 3 went through many variations.
Bald Monks, Planet of Wood.
Right.
Yes.
And of course,
I know it all.
This is a movie that probably right up until its release wasn't definite. There were people tweaking this thing right up to the very end. So I'm sure that someone who takes as long as a fully painted artist couldn't keep up with that. And they've gone through several different artists before they got to the final one. So I'm not sure how much of a rush job this was, but I do have a little bit of insight as to how Stephen Grant ended up adapting it. I went online and there was a webpage called Magazines and Monsters, Comic Book and Movie Reviews. And this was posted on July 24th, 2015 by Billy D75. It's an interview with Stephen Grant. I'm taking a substantial excerpt to explain his involvement. So what Grant says is that I kind of sideways my way into Dark Horse. In 1989, I ran into Bill Marks, publisher of Vortex Comics out of Canada, at a retailer's convention in Madison, one of the few times I had been back there since I left. At that point, he was flush off the mad success of Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss, and knowing Howard and I hung out a lot in Los Angeles, and I guess knew I had an interest in crime material, asked if I had any good crime comic ideas, because he wanted to publish more of them. I didn't, but concocted on the spot the single best pitch I've ever done. Verbatim, a crime story, set in 1963, and starring the man who really killed John Kennedy. Turned out he was a Kennedy assassination fanatic, and bought it on the spot. This became Badlands. Bill published the first issue, but was overextended with too many projects and quit publishing. By that point, I'd written the whole thing. It might have been the fastest, easiest job I ever did. It just flowed like the rushing waters. It was practically automatic writing, and I really liked it. Still listed it as arguably my best work, so I surveyed the landscape for a new publisher, figured Dark Horse was the best bet, and sent it cold to Mike Richardson. He liked it. I took the opportunity to pitch another idea. When I was writing for Jonathan at DC, he encouraged me to come up with revamps for fallow old DC properties. I developed a pretty political take on the 40s character Americommando, whose name I love. It's such a great and such a stupid name at the same time. That went nowhere, so I massaged it into a new property I called Patriot X and pitched to Mike. Mike liked the idea but was unnerved by it too, since he and part of the Dark Horse staff had secretly spent a couple of years developing a superhero universe, and one of their central characters was a vigilante named X, who had a couple of characteristics in common with Patriot X. I think he was a little nervous. I think they had ripped me off, so I assured him I never thought that the case. So he offered me the scripting chores on X and agreed to publish Patriot X if I renamed it to avoid conflicts. It came out as Enemy, edited by Bob Schreck, who's been a very good friend ever since. Dan Thorsland edited X and also became a good friend and kept working with me when I jumped to DC a couple of years later. At the time, Dark Horse was trying to expand into movies, only to find that no one in Hollywood took you seriously as a film company until you've made a film. Any film doesn't really matter, you just have to prove you can produce a film. Mike Richardson had hooked up with a very well-known producer named Larry Gordon. Larry had a little horror picture already in the can and decided to jumpstart Dark Horse Productions by putting their name on it. It was a perfectly ghastly thing called Dr. Giggles. Due to circumstances, Mike needed a comic adaptation of it yesterday, right about the time we were talking projects. While I had never done a film adaptation prior to that, I had done several issues of First Comics' Classics Illustrated revival. So more for professional lubricant than anything else, I signed on to do the Dr. Giggles comic. I guess that went well enough, and they started asking me to do other adaptations like Alien 3 and RoboCop 3. Because I've ended up doing quite a bit of RoboCop over the years, a lot of people think I have a strong affection for the material, but it was all all just assignments. I always try to do as good a job as I could, but movies are other people's projects. While these are things I'm a big fan of, I tend to save my affections for my own creations. Funny story related to them though. I was on a panel at a Portland con discussing adapting movies to comics with John Arcudi, who did a lot of adapted expanded movie comics for Dark Horse. I mentioned in passing I'd gotten a phone call from Fred Decker, director of RoboCop 3, to tell me how much he liked the adaptation. John caught me on the floor later and asked if that story was true. When I said it was, he got very depressed because no one ever called him with a similar message. I asked if he put his phone number on his scripts. He said no. I told him he might want to try that. It increases the odds dramatically. Enemy didn't sell at all, but it did end up being bought and made into a TV pilot by Fox circa 1996. I think it was the first thing David Goyer, who wrote the pilot, got a producer credit on. I'm told for a while it was on the fall schedule, though ultimately it wasn't, and though it went nowhere, it opened up doors for Dark Horse, so the project was probably a net win for them. Mike recently asked me to revive it. We're probably doing a new Enemy series next year. It's only 22 years later. So I'm betting there was a whole bunch of like memorabilia just exploding over the course of that piece there.
Yeah, I mean, Enemies on the HFCOF list someday. Wow. Dr. Giggles, like, so that, I mean, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, it's interesting. But, I mean, I imagine this is the same as what he felt about RoboCop, right? Like, it was just a work for hire.
Let's put it this way. He went back to RoboCop. Not
yeah,
so much
that's
Alien.
true. That's true. That's true. Clearly, I must have been into it, and there was a certain level of momentum building up to the film, right? I was excited enough to go see it. I bought the first issue of it. I don't know if where we're leading is this is more disappointing than Genocide, like, because I mean, I don't know. It's weird, and I feel kind of like a duty head too, because like some of the people I see, I was like, oh, look, it's because on the inks it was Rick Magyar, doing the inks, and I was kind of like, oh, I just bought like a really nice John Constantine splash page with his art. I mean, obviously there's things about it I like, but I kind of feel like, you know what, it reminds me of that. You remember that Marvel adaptation of Terminator 2? I feel like it's mean, but it's like, that's what this kind of seemed to me. It's like this confused, convoluted, and probably, I guess I'm kind of amazed at how close this adaptation like is to the movie, given all the tortured backstory it has and the created by committee nature of the film. Like I'm kind of impressed. Some of the art is kind of, doesn't look like there's no likenesses. Like that's kind of disappointing, right? Like when you think you're buying a product, but you're getting something else instead, like that kind of thing. But I mean, as far as like when I started comparing stuff, I mean, most of it, like I'm looking and I'm like, okay, yeah, the dialogue kind of matches, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, some of the moments are out of sequence. I think they tried to do it in such a way so that like there was at least some alien action in each issue, but other than that, I mean, it seemed like, I mean, I don't know how you took it, but it seemed like to me, like, I mean, for the most part, I didn't see any like, gigantic, like I kind of expected to see like, how like they've got the dog and they've got the alien comes out of the dog and all, like I was kind of, because I guess I'm used to the work print and all this other, backstory, like, oh, at one point it was going to be the freaking goat or the calf or whatever the hell it was.
It was a cow. Cattle, yeah.
Right. So the alien pops out of the cow. Like part of me was wondering like if I was going to see like, a cow 1 minute and a dog the next, like if it was going to be all, kind of convoluted and not quite caught up to the film. So, I mean, as far as the dialogue goes, I feel like that was sort of on point. The thing that was weird to me though was like the acting in this is, part of the disappointment. It's like not only is it like not, it doesn't really reflect the actors who were in the film, but like, I don't know, something about it bugged me where it's like it's like that panel of Ripley when he tells her they didn't survive. It's like she's all teary-eyed and has like the shocked look on her face, and they got the speed lines that it's just like supposed to be this like, and there's no other panels around her and it's all black and everything. Like it's supposed to be this big traumatic moment, and not like a fucking page later she's smirking at the guy. And I'm just kind of like, does that, I mean, even in the film it doesn't play that way. Like in the film she tries to hide that she's, emotionally impacted by it. Like she's trying to play her cards close to her vest in the film. Like that's how I took it. She was impacted by the information that they didn't survive, but she wasn't about to like, totally break down and cry in front of this guy. And then she doesn't break down until she actually like goes into the ship and starts looking at the shit. And then at that point, she's like, oh, fuck, this is real. And she has a moment, right? But in this, it's like she breaks down before she even gets to the ship, sort of. But then on the way to the ship, then it's like how come you know my name? You know, and I'm just like, I don't know. It's like she gets this weird look on her face, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know what's up with all this. But I don't know. The acting in this is, you know, quote unquote acting, you know, in this adaptation is kind of funky.
This was, yeah. It's funny because one of the things people talk about with 90s comics, particularly from some of the big names guys, they had a Who podcast earlier this week as we're recording, and they're talking about Travis Charvet, I believe is the pronunciation, or Charest, whatever you want to say, and how
Charest,
basically he's one of those guys where he drew a lot of lines, but like everybody just sort of looked like this constipated look on everybody's faces, and I can't dispute that.
I would pay good money to have Travis Charest draw this shit instead of
he's
this
drawn
guy.
aliens in the past. There's pieces by him out there, and they are quite good. But yeah, that would have been an instance where you get those inexpressive 90s artists, and that would have actually been more in line with the movie, that kind of cold, calculating nature of the movie, and Ripley in the movie. But here, he's going for like old school, like, oh no, I'm sad. Let me show the tears, you know, in my eyes, you know, pooling and everything else. This is more like a cartoon kind of take. But it's also funny because you'll have that very overt, clumsy expression of emotion, but also like none of these people have any individualistic characteristics at all. It's literally like a bunch of bold action figures. It looks like they used to sell, you could buy like generic action figure and then you could go and customize it, and they give you the equipment to customize that figure. Every character in this comic book looks like that. They all feel like they're the life model. They're just being posed in various positions, and they're acting against one another as though they're separate people, but they all have the same build, the same look, everything.
Yeah.
Excerpt from the May 1992 cover-dated Premiere magazine. The article Mother from Another Planet by John H. Richardson. David Fincher, a 27-year-old first-time director, was determined to fulfill his creative vision on Alien 3, despite intense efforts to hold him back. The writer spends a couple of paragraphs describing the filming of a scene. In the movie, this moment will come a few minutes before the climax, when the indomitable Lieutenant Ellen Ripley and a team of religious fanatic convicts dump a vat of molten lead on its head. Yesterday, they shot the scene 10 times, using black paint for lead, 10,000 gallons of it over and over on the head of some poor guy in a rubber suit. It's December 1991, and they are shooting Alien 3 on a soundstage on the 20th Century Fox lot. Principal photography began almost a year ago in London, but when shooting went 23 days over schedule and untold millions over budget, Fox pulled the plug and ordered the filmmakers home. Originally scheduled to debut in the summer of 1991, then put off till Christmas, this movie is now aimed at Memorial Day 1992. For months, Hollywood has been rife with Alien 3 rumors, that it's a disaster, that it cost upwards of $60 million, that preview screenings were horrible, that Fox chairman Joe Roth hated it, that it really needed 6 weeks of reshoots and another $15 million and then maybe it would work. But there's another side too, that it's visually brilliant, daring, a work of art from an extraordinary young director. Add that the first director was let go while sets were being built, that the line producer was fired just before the start date, that the script wasn't finished until 2 weeks into shooting, and you have a young man with his hands extremely full. As one of his friends puts it, he was right out of the Naval Academy School and he got put at the helm of the Titanic. They have been working on this one 5-second shot since 7:30 a.m. It's now 4:30 in the afternoon, and they're 2 hours behind. Fincher orders more changes and dashes over to the editing room. As he walks, he talks about how tough the shoot has been and how he's fighting to keep the film bleak. Although he's often described as arrogant, he seems merely direct. But occasionally he drops a remark that would make a studio executive with millions of dollars on the line a tad nervous. I'm not making this movie for 50 million people, he says. I'm making it for 8 people, my friends, people who know cameras and lighting. That works out to a budget of just over $6 million per friend. This shot is about 5 times more complicated than when we started out, London says. The studio was expecting just 2 simple shots of the writhing alien, but Fincher has added dripping water, foreground pipes, and extra steam. Fox Executive Vice President Tom Jacobson and Senior Vice President John Landau have joined London, and all 3 executives are looking over Fincher's shoulder. Fincher watches the playback intently. Finally, he nods, satisfied. It's 6:30, 11 hours after first call. He's got his 5 seconds of film, his way.
I had never thought of this before, because this is, like I said, technically like, 3rd or 4th time I watched this. Stripping the aliens out of it, I I was just kind of like thinking to myself, like, Ripley's supposed to be this female action hero, this symbol of empowerment, and the first thing they have her do is make her scared of a bunch of hardcore prisoners. What does she care? She's fucking face down a fucking alien queen. Like,
well, that's just it though.
Who gives a
she's
fuck
not
about
scared
these guys?
though. That because I not having like I haven't rewatched the movie since 2016 if I remember correctly or thereabouts. But my recollection is part of the problem she has is they're trying to isolate her and quote unquote protect her, and she keeps not taking that protection and underestimating the threat of the prisoners. But I don't get the impression that we're supposed to be scared for Ripley in that circumstance. I don't get the impression that Ripley herself is scared in that circumstance, and yet the movie does demonstrate there's reason for her to be afraid, and she ought to maybe take this a little more seriously.
Well, I guess the reason why it hit me more strongly this time is the sequence where she goes to pick up Bishop's like half a corpse or whatever the hell it is, right? And to plug him back into the thing and get the information from the flight recorder. It's like she goes there and she there's two guys in one section of the alley or whatever it is, and then she starts walking the other way, and then the guy with the stupid fucking tear tattoo like blocks her off, and then all of a sudden 4 guys are surrounding her. The guy with the tears about to like, anally rape her or some shit. You know what I mean? And then if not for, Charles S. Dutton, fuck that thing. If not for fucking Rock, right, with his live television performances beating the shit out of these guys with a fucking crowbar, I think at that point Ripley gets Oz raped and fucking discarded. Like, but my attitude about that was kind of like, wait, what? Like, I don't know. Like, it's like that's that moment where if you take it that far, to me it's almost the same thing as the end where she gets, she has to sacrifice herself and commit suicide and all this. I don't know. It's so fucking dark and dour, and like it puts a big fat farty stink over everything that you could possibly like about that franchise before this. And I'm like, why would you do such a thing? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense to me. So
it's like you look at the analysis, kicking a hornet's nest, whatever you want to call it. I've mentioned many a times that I am perfectly fine with the Snyder movies. It's the Snyder fandom that gets on my fucking nerves, and just their endless demands. And right now that weird thing where they think that they're going to get what they want to out of the Discovery merger, not realizing the only reason why Zack Snyder's Justice League ever came into being was there was a goddamn once in a fucking 100 years pandemic, and everybody was doing weird shit to try to figure out what they were going to do to continue maintain their worlds in the midst of the global pandemic. But one of the things that's been talked about, I want to say it was Maggie Mayfish, but it may have been some other commentator, was talking about the different worldviews. And like from interviewing comic book creators, one thing I've definitely found, particularly with those 70s guys, is how quickly they will slag on DC and how much they love Marvel's both their reality and also the sense of humor. They don't take themselves so seriously, but they're also more grounded in a reality that's recognizable. And one of the things I've seen discussed about the Snyderverse is that a lot of the guys that glom onto that, they can't stand that humor. They can't stand this sort of lighthearted, taking the piss out of their universe. They want to believe in their universe. They want it to be a realistic universe, and they also want it to be a dark and grim place because that reflects their reality. A lot of people that glom onto the Snyderverse are people who have not had a great life and don't have the kind of relationship, maybe I don't want to go that far to it, but people who maybe just don't have an optimistic worldview and have not perhaps had the best shake in life and don't appreciate humor and don't appreciate taking the air out of the fantasy, and they want a consistent reality that reflects that worldview.
There's a balance though,
Sure.
Like,
but it gets back to what you're saying, is that one of the things that I dislike about the Snyderverse movies, and that a lot of people dislike, and the more vocal critics, is why can't you be happy? Why can't you smile? Why does everything have to be the worst scenario? Everybody loves that pull quote where in Snyder's universe, Batman can be raped in prison shit. And really, Alien 3 is the Snyderiest of all the Aliens movies, because as you say, it is like peak edgelord. Let's do all the worst things. Let's have all the worst outcomes. Let's have complete and utter hopeless nihilism, and that's going to be our movie. And very much like with the Snyderverse, there's a large segment of the viewing audience that immediately rejects that because they love these characters, they love this universe, even though it's a horror sci-fi universe, and you can't necessarily expect to be comforted, and you can't necessarily expect to laugh. But as you say, balance. If we're going to go into the situation adaptation, you have to know that you're going to actually be entertained and you're going to enjoy yourself, and that the scares are going to be scares that they're going to be cathartic as you leave the theater and not traumatizing, that you're not going to take these things that people love and fucking kill them and make them fucking sit through the autopsy of the murder of the thing, the person, the character that they fell in love with. And so this is a very edgelord movie at a time when that was not a thing that could be expected. Today, this would be a much more common experience, but no audience was prepared for how fucked up Alien 3 was going to end up being and how anti-audience, anti-expectation it was.
Well, it's anti-audience and anti-expectation because it's serving the whims of people's egos. Like, and I mean, look, I like the Snyder fucking Justice League and all that shit, but it's like, so maybe I'm biased, but it's not going to make anything any better if you put in a couple of funny haha jokes into Alien 3. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like if you make some poor taste shitty jokes, it's like that's not going to fix it. But I feel like sometimes people think like, oh, as long as we get the ha-has from the audience, like if we put a couple 20 or 12 good jokes into this edgelord whatever you called it, like it's going to fix it. And I'm like, no man, it's like it still sucked. Like it doesn't to me, it's like I want to take the franchise seriously. That doesn't mean it can't have humor in it. It doesn't mean that it's got to be devoid of charm, but at the same time, for me, it can't be devoid of, I don't know, man, like Ragnarok humor. Like, I can't stand that shit, because you can tell they don't care about the characters, but you still got ha-has. They wiped out the fucking Warriors 3 and shit all over Thor, so he's not even Thor anymore, but then you told a bunch of jokes, so everybody's happy. Like, that to me is just as bad as Alien. Like, in other words, I get as worked up about that as I would about Alien 3, but I know tons of people love that movie. So it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm a bad litmus for that kind of thing, but it's like, I don't know. For me, it doesn't make a difference either way, whether it's something that's trying to be, I guess, edgelord, or something that's trying to be, haha, clever. It's like, if it's bad, like Alien 3 is, it's fucking bad. Like, it doesn't, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't, you can't put chocolate over a big giant steaming pile of shit and expect it to be good. Like, it is what it is,
Excerpt from the May 1992 cover-dated Premiere magazine. The article Mother from Another Planet by John H. Richardson. Since Fincher and Weaver were both taken with the religious element, they made the prisoners what Geiler calls your basic militant Christian fundamentalist millenarian apocalyptic types. In just 3 weeks, they had a first draft. The studio liked it, Weaver liked it, but alas, Fincher had a few reservations. Fox cut the shooting schedule down to 70 days, a loss of 23 days. Fincher would only get 25 special effects shots, less than half what Aliens had. Weaver thought the shortened schedule insane. The filmmakers ended up working 18-hour days and 6-day weeks to try to meet the stop date, a grueling pace that she says caused actual physical danger. At one point, when an explosion effect backfired, 5 crew members got burned, one badly enough to go to the hospital. The first Alien took 16 and a half weeks, and the second one took 18 weeks, says Weaver. Why do they think they could make the third one in 13 weeks? Birnbaum's reply: we were trying to manage the cost of the picture, which was not Sigourney's responsibility. She was not paying for this movie or line producing this movie.
I don't know why. I'm just thinking of going back to my card thing again. Like, the thing I noticed about that was, I know they're all interchangeable and we don't know the difference between them. The sole bald guy who helps Sigourney Weaver, I guess, end the menace of the alien queen that lifts her on the little apparatus or whatever and takes her away and everything. The one guy who doesn't get killed by the end, if you look at his quote unquote file card or his trading card, he's the only guy who didn't kill or rape or whatever. Like, he was a robber. So I don't know. I had this weird thing of I don't know. Maybe if I had known that, maybe that ending would have resonated a little more with me or have more meaning. But I don't know. Anyway, it's a random thought.
Well, there's a lot of confusion for myself as well. Is that reading all this material, there were so many different accounts, and not making a point of not rewatching the movie because I really wanted to reference the comics and the events more than the actual movie itself. From my perspective, I knew you were going to talk about the movie, and I knew that through you, I was going to get enough talking to the movie without making a 3-hour podcast by doing, the commentary tracks and shit. Not having rewatched the movie, I read the comic instead, and like you said, in broad strokes, it seemed familiar, and it seemed like it was pretty close to the theatrical release of the movie. But not having watched any of the takes, I couldn't tell the differences. So I went to Wikipedia of all the obvious places to go to, and I wanted to see what they talked about. And they said that it was like we all agree, it was pretty faithful to the theatrical release. Verbatim, they write, one such deviation is that Ripley and the convicts succeed in capturing the xenomorph in the waste tank, only for a deranged prisoner named Gallic to release it afterward. And I still think, since you've watched it more recently, wasn't there one version where the guy who worships the alien goes and saves the alien, or is it just a situation where he goes after him and he ends up getting killed by the alien in the movie?
Maybe that's it's been a long time. I've only seen that work print once, but maybe that's something that was still salvaged from the work print, because I know what you're talking about. It's the guy who sees the I don't know, dog alien or whatever we're calling him, but it's the guy that because there were those couple guys that were there was the one, I think, black guy.
I'm going to call him Dollarhide because he focuses on the dragon and loves the dragon.
Yeah, the guy that calls it the dragon, right? And I think I'm trying to remember, but I think in this adaptation he's like, I want to be your friend, like let's be buds. Like, I don't know, he's kind of lost it at that point, and it's like obviously the same thing is portrayed in the same mentality is portrayed in the theatrical version, but I don't think he ever. I don't remember him releasing it, or if he did release it, the theatrical version is vague about why that takes place, whereas I think maybe the whole he's trying to make friends with the demon thing is not clearly spelled out.
Yeah, and my recollection of the movie is they attempt to trap the alien and they fail, and a bunch of them die in the process of that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the comic, they do successfully secure the alien, but then Gorlick lets it out. Yeah. And I don't recall if in any version of the movie they have that sequence where he's talking to Ripley and it makes it clear that this is a serial murderer of women who has the intention of killing Ripley if he has the chance as well, which is very explicitly done in the comic book. His madness is he's clearly mad in the movie, but the specific misogynistic element to it, and I think was definitely more impactful for me in the comic book if it did appear in the movie at all. And then another line from the Wikipedia entry, later when they believe they have destroyed the alien, Ripley begs Dylan to kill her, but he can't bring himself to do it. And that's definitely a very memorable scene from all the versions of the movie that's not present in the comic book. And then finally, the xenomorph suddenly appears and tosses Dylan into the smelting furnace. Now, in reading this additional material, one thing that they mention was that Gorlick, I think in one version, was the last survivor. He was the only one who didn't get killed in one of the versions of the movie that was shot, and he's the one who goes off with the company men at the end.
Yeah.
So one of the worst of them, the most deranged, the most irredeemable, is also the sole survivor. So when you were talking about how the one guy who wasn't so bad was a survivor in the version you watched, they were talking about a version where the absolute most dire person is the survivor as well. So again, permutations. There's so many weird shit.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the trading cards, having read that story, it's only a 9-panel grid. Can you tell people what happened in the Alone story?
There's some guys that are looking around, I guess. I'm trying to here. I'm just gonna look at it because I barely. It looks like these guys are stranded and there's a ship that has crashed and they check it out, but then all they find is a bunch of dead skeletons and bodies, and they figure nobody's there. But then they come across a egg, and then the next thing you know, they find one of their buddies, and he's already, I guess somehow in between those two panels, the chest burster came out of him somehow. So it's already, I don't know, got on his face, laid an egg, and the aliens already come out and they're still looking for, I guess, I don't know if it's a girl with a baby doll or what the deal is with that, but they're looking for somebody that had a doll. And then before you know it, the guy finds the doll, and then basically it's like the title of the story. He's left alone to, presumably die at the hands of a xenomorph.
And do you actually have the physical cards in front of you? Because I've got back, again, folks in our generation will probably remember this. There was a time when trading cards were popular enough where you'd go to a shop and it'd have a big cardboard box with rows of these single cards, and you could go through them and buy individual cards to finish up your sets and shit for X amount of coin. And I bought the cards from the Alien 3 set that I could get my hands on. They were of interest to me. I did buy many of those black and white character spotlight images, which definitely oversold those characters in the degree to which they had value. And I don't remember how many of them I got. I'm pretty confident I had a Bishop one, though. I think I had the Charles Dutton character, the ones I could get a hold of. And were those character profile cards the same ones that had the Alone story on the backs of them? Because I know I have some of those portions, but I didn't have the whole thing. Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Because the doll especially is always memorable to me.
I'm sorry, say again about the doll?
The card with the doll and the blood letting you know that the child has been killed. I want to say I have that card because that one definitely is strong in my mind. That one, final panel where you see the close-up of the alien attacking, those two panels are very memorable for me, where I never had the full 9-card set, though.
Okay.
By the way, do they have credits on there?
At the end. So, writer, Jerry Prosser, letterer, Carrie Grazzini, producer, Hoang Nguyen, colorist, Chris Schellender, inker Paul Guinan, editor Ted Adams.
So that's that dude that did a lot of Malibu stuff. Like, didn't he do War Strike and some stuff like that? The artist, I mean.
Oh, okay. I now that you mentioned War Strike, I've got this image in my head of a big muscled guy with guns and hair and the gambit.
Yeah, and I think he had a team book earlier on called like the Unit or something. But he did a bunch of stuff in that time period. He didn't have longevity, but I want to say he did a bunch of Malibu stuff, and it wasn't really known necessarily for Dark Horse material. And like you said, it wasn't anything exceptional. I'm glad they told a relatively complete story in 9 panels, but you can give or take it. But I do have to say that I'm grateful that Marvel put the Alien 3 adaptation and those trading cards into their omnibus, because I would not have been able to dig that stuff up necessarily, and I wanted to be as comprehensive with that as possible. And also, you've done
a fantastic job of being comprehensive, because you've consistently uncovered things that however you're deciding to cover them, I mean it when I say, like, I feel like I was like, I think I read all the Alien shit, I can keep up with this, but you consistently bring new things where I'm like, Colonial Marines, like, what, you know what I mean, like, where I'm like, there's new vantage points and aspects to this of stuff that I never ended up looking into, so I think you do an excellent job doing that.
Well, thank you, but I have to give some the majority of the credit goes to Xenopedia, who are much more convicted fans than I'll ever be. Right, but also, with the exception of really wishing Cyber Antics had turned up in one of the omnibuses, I think Marvel's done a really good job with the omnibuses so far, and in getting those kind of additional materials. I'm especially grateful to them for having so many of like the introductions and end pieces from the trades and such. But notably, there was no material like that for Alien 3. I don't think they ever even did a trade for that comic book miniseries. I think the miniseries just kind of got shot out, and then they kind of moved past it. But speaking of obscurities, did you happen to manage to find the Terminal Addiction out there online? Because that's what I find it online.
I found that, I assume it's Xenopedia. This is just those ads, right? Like for the video game and the Game Boy comic and everything. Yeah, so I've looked at them. I mean, I started questioning it, and then part of me wanted to see if I could find maybe scans of the magazines they originated from, but I wasn't too fortunate with that, because I don't think enough of those are scanned. So like I found a magazine that was scanned, I think, of the first Aliens volume, but I guess according to Xenopedia, this is from Aliens Magazine Volume 2, Issue 12. So I'm like, just kind of, I mean, essentially they're ad. I mean, they're not, I mean, I don't, I mean, the art's nice and everything, but it's like they're ads for a Super Nintendo video game and a Game Boy video game? I don't know. Yeah,
it's one of the ads is a kid who gets transported and becoming one of the convicts on the prison planet, and it's like, this is so fucked. Do you guys not know how fucked this is? This kid is being transformed into a probable rapist murderer to take part in this dire film. It's just so bizarre to me. Just like, you can be on the action. It's like, I don't want to be in the Oz, video game. What?
Yeah.
Really? But yeah, if I recall, the art on those was done by David Roach, who's a very respected 2000 AD British artist.
Yeah,
and like you said, they look good. They're little 2-pagers, nothing substantial in terms of story, but yeah, they're there to sell the Alien 3 cartridge game.
It's weird too, because I guess the theme of it is it's a funny ad, because I guess what it's trying to sell you is that this game is so engrossing, it's like actually being there. But then, like, for me, the weird part of it is because it's a, essentially a horror franchise, right? Like it's like they bring the alien back with them in both of these sequences. I guess I understand what you're saying. Like, why would you want to turn into this horrible rapist killer or soldier or whatever, right? Like, why would you want to become those things? But then also, like, why would you? It's like that. I guess I always say it's fun to watch Beavis and Butthead, but like, you wouldn't want to like run into them in real life. You know what I mean? Like, and it feels like the same thing. It's like, why would you want to why would you want to be so engrossed in a video game that you bring an alien back with you and it eats you and burps? You know what I mean? Like
yeah, it's this weird hybrid of, we're trying to do a short story and we're trying to show you how immersive this is, and we want to do like when they had the arcade version of Aliens and you're a colonial marine and you're running around with a pulse rifle, and it's like, oh yeah, I get that makes sense. Yeah. But now you're being a convict, and also you have the EC quasi twist ending where it's, oh no, you're going to die from playing this video game. It's a monkey's paw situation. That is, like, in a nutshell, how fucked this movie was in terms of it being a commodity. Like, however you feel about the movie as art, as a commodity, it was a terrible thing to put out there, because you're not making action figures of this. You shouldn't be making video games of this. This is not what people want.
You can't identify, right? Like why would you want to identify? Like, that's the kind of thing I always talk about, and I usually call it the Oz effect. It's like you start watching Oz, you start following certain characters, and before you know it, somebody's getting gang raped, and then at that point you have to shut off all your empathy or identification with that person, right? Because why would you even want to like pretend that happened to you? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a useful exercise. It's like funny because I feel the same way about this. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna pretend to get eaten by an alien. It's like, that's not useful. Like, I get what you're saying. It's more useful to have the James Cameron gun with the counter, and you're blowing away eggs and just making all these aliens bluey juice like that. I could understand, like, oh, that's a way to sell a video game, but not Alien 3 is definitely not something that can sell the toys, I guess.
You're part of the action, the Lars von Trier multiverse. Like, what? I don't want to play Dogville. What the fuck?
Destroy every egg-laying, chest-bursting, acid-spitting alien on the planet, or this nightmare will never end. Alien 3 on Super NES from LJN.
Excerpt from the May 1992 cover-dated Premiere magazine. The article Mother from Another Planet by John H. Richardson. Sigourney Weaver describes a bad experience on the first day of shooting when she was naked, blinded by contact lenses.
And I heard the director say, sprinkle a few bugs on her because this is a lice-infested planet. And I thought, well, that's fine. He's going to sprinkle a few bugs on her. And this bug wrangler came over, who I don't think has worked with many actors, and he had a cup of bugs, and he sort of dumped it on my face, and I didn't know they were coming. He didn't go, now I'm going to put the bugs on your face. Just in mid-sentence, I had suddenly bugs in my mouth and ears. And so I got after the director for it a few times. And every time I had to do something like climb something high really fast, he'd say, all right, let's bring in the tarantulas. She'll get up that wall pretty quickly.
Turned out they were baby crickets. Things were kind of rough for a little while there, but then eventually they shot the scene of Newt's autopsy. And Weaver said, if David had been insensitive, it would have been a nightmare. But he was great, incredibly sweet and supportive. You do find out what people are like when you shoot. He's not only brilliant, but also a very good guy. Line producer Swerdlow was also impressed with Fincher. A lot of directors just tell you what they want the end product to be, but not how to get there. David is a world-class visual effects expert and seemed to understand lighting very scientifically. As shooting continued into May, Fincher passed the targeted stop date. When the production went about 10 days over, John Landau showed up and took over. Weaver was incensed. John came over with instructions to cut this, slash this, and there was an inference that David was an enfant terrible going mad. It is very contemptuous of the effort we were putting in to come in and say that this isn't necessary or that's not necessary. Weaver tried to use her clout and called on Joe Roth directly, but it was too late. In the end, she says it came to a showdown between the director's vision and a dwindling amount of cold, hard cash. Roth says he couldn't be sure that Fincher wasn't wasting film on unnecessary effect. It's really hard to tell on science fiction, he says. Fincher had shot a long time before he came back, and I felt it was important to see the movie at that point and reconstruct what needed to be finished. For most of the cast and crew, the end came none too soon. It was a general relief for everyone, says actor Charles Dutton. Even Fincher agreed. As upset as I was so exhausted, I was glad to get back on the plane. For the next year, Fincher labored in the editing room. He made about $250,000 for Alien 3, not much more than the DGA minimum. Fox ultimately decided to keep him in LA and cut down his wish list from almost 6 weeks to a mere 8 days of reshoots at a cost of about $2.5 million. But as the film approached final cut, people's spirits started to pick up. Weaver and Fox and even Hill and Geiler started praising the film. It really stands on its own as a brilliant alien picture. Very unusual and very provocative, says Weaver, who is not given to hype. Brilliant or failed, it will certainly not be your average monster movie. Fox was even happy enough to kick in 6 more days and another $1 million or $2 million to shoot one of Fincher's pet scenes, the birth of a baby alien.
So we've danced around this a lot. Thought for sure that I'd seen Alien 3 when I was still living in Colorado. But based on the timeline I'm looking at, I must have been back in Texas by then. That would make sense too, because I remember that in going through these references, they talked about that infamous teaser for Alien 3, where in space nobody can hear you scream, but on Earth everybody will. And I never expected this drilled out. Apparently, that specifically ran in front of Point Break. And they make a point of mentioning, I think it was like the Fox flop, summer flop, Point Break. And of course, talking about how it was supposed to be a December release, and then eventually it came out on, I think, the following Memorial Day or some shit like that. And did you see that teaser? Did that hype you up?
I saw. I guess my memory's playing tricks on me, because I was like, Point Break was a flop? What? Like,
right,
what about, dude? Like, that was awesome.
Oh, yeah. Apparently, I was an early adopter of Point Break, because I saw that theatrtically and fucking loved it.
Yeah, I remember. I remember
Could you
seeing it in the
imagine
theater.
if she had directed an Alien movie? How fucking awesome that would have been. Man, that would have been so, like, if you want that Cameron quality, oh my god, that would have been so incredible. But anyway, the side note.
Yeah, so I did see Point Break theatrically, so I must have seen that. I mean, as you talk about it, I kind of am remembering it, but it's been, I probably, if I've seen Alien 3 like 3 times, I've seen that trailer 1 time. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and seeing that teaser and then seeing the trailers, especially the infamous shot where the the drone with the jackhammer jaws is face to face with Ripley, which is now a meme. It looked intense, and it was a little strange, especially in the 90s, to see a woman with her head shaved like that. That was not a manifestation of femininity that was well tolerated in that time period. I mean, it's one of those things that is worth talking about. Like, how much shit that we're fine with today, like a woman with a shaved head, fucked people's heads up in 1990, whatever, you know? But I remember going into the movie hyped, and just as has happened every single time I've gone to to see an alien movie since Aliens. I went in there with an expectation that in this particular instance higher than ever any time since, and was just crushed by that movie. And like you said, you're going in there, you're seeing aliens, you're hoping that everybody that you love is going to be in this movie, and like you said, they died, and then they lied, and it all happened off screen. And again, it being like the antithesis of Aliens, where you're not going to love any of these characters, and everybody's going to come to a bad end, and everything's going to be dire, and you walk out of the fucking movie depressed and just like emotionally wrought. I fucking hated Alien 3 when I saw it, and it was just ruinous for me as a fan of the property. I started kind of reading the comic books. I was somewhat turned off. I don't think I was completely turned off because I definitely still continue to try Alien stuff after the movie, but I completely understand your perspective on this because it was just a crushing first experience. There are a few movies I hated as much as I hated Alien 3 the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there are movies like there are movies I hated the first time I've seen them. I can probably think of a few, but this certainly ranks quite high up there, and probably more so than a lot of the others because I don't know. It's like Mission to Mars and Red Planet. It's like there weren't franchises. I didn't care about whatever it was, right? But like something like Aliens 3 and Ghostbusters 2, like those were things where the previous installments you're like, oh boy, this is going to be great, and then for me those other ones are massively disappointing, and that's why I was like when I was looking at it, that's why I was like, oh, my recognition goes completely dark after the cover to the first issue of Alien 3. Alien 3 #1, that stands out to me because I recognize the cover, but those other two covers, I keep staring at them and I'm like, oh, the one with, I guess that's Ripley on the third cover and stuff like that, like both those kind of look foreign to me, so I can tell I did not keep buying that miniseries. And like I was trying to think about this, like I was trying to put it in terms of a timetable I could follow, and I think it doesn't really count because I didn't buy, well, I don't know if this counts or not, but I think the next time I even bothered to check out anything to do with aliens in comics after this was when they had the free 2-page previews that John Byrne did of Earth Angel, and I think that was like 2 years after this. And then I think a year after that I read probably Superman Aliens. So it's like it was a while before I got back into or tried something after this, because this was I don't know, for me this was kind of a franchise killer or a deal breaker or whatever you want to call it. It definitely gave me a cold shower when it came to Aliens.
And I dug out the first issue of Alien 3 in a dollar bin, in a local dollar bin, because I was trying to find the whole miniseries, because most of these books I try to look at the original publication versus the reprints and the like. But again, the only time this was reprinted when it was really more like simulcast in the UK in their Alien 3 magazine. They did a 3-issue run where they ran the adaptation, but they also had some additional material involving aliens and predators to fill out the magazine. I only found the first issue, and in comparing that issue with the Marvel Omnibus, it looks like it's one for one essentially. There's no great disparity there. I think they might have done digital coloring on that one because it looks like a bunch of flats anyway. But the major difference with the Omnibus is that it's darker. Like not only are the blacks blacker, but like the colors in general are just much darker. And I think maybe part of the reason for that is to kind of obscure how bad the artwork is. So to talk about the artist, it was drawn by Christopher Taylor and inked by Rick Magyar. Rick Magyar in particular, I thought did some really great work over Dennis Cowan on The Question. I think it's probably one of the things he's best known for. And I knew this is clearly bad 90s artwork. This is just like stock bad 90s artwork. C-list titles, like the lesser DC and Marvel titles. This is the quality of artwork. But there was some element of that was familiar to me. So I did a little research on the guy, and it turns out he's the one who drew the Blood Pack miniseries, the miniseries that tried to make a team out of the various New Blood. So in the time frame of this book coming out, that's what I would have known him from. He also did a few issues of Legion of Superheroes. He did some Dark Stars, little stuff like that. Fairly consistent quality across the board. So while I would definitely say Blood Pack was a better looking book and a better realized book than Alien 3, he wasn't like a light years difference or anything. And that was pretty much all he did. He's only done a handful of comic books over his career, but I think I found the guy. I think he goes by Alpha CMT because his full name is Christopher Michael Taylor. And he's actually gotten to be a really great digital artist. Very attractive work, very political, very leftist. I'm pretty sure he's queer as well because there's a lot of queer content. Facebook, he's got a variety of different mediums where you can buy prints and t-shirts and stuff. And his stuff looks very, very nice. Now, I would love to see some of his work today, like with Aliens characters, but I don't think he's gone back there again or had any desire to go back there again. So I hate to slag the guy because he's obviously progressed from there. But in this time period, I don't think this was very good. It definitely, in terms of quality of adaptation and just in storytelling in general, this is so far beneath any of the other Aliens comic books. It's not even funny. It's sad. I guess the closest would be Genocide, but the Genocide artist was much better than him in this time period. One of the things that really frustrated, though, like there were instances where it looked like dialogue maybe fell off somewhere along the way. I had trouble following panel to panel sometimes how the conversations were going, particularly during a one-on-one between the doctor character and the warden character. I would get lost, and as you said, there were instances where it's like, okay, what the fuck's happening here? But the parts that really got me was there's a lot of sequences in the movie where people are running down narrow corridors, and it's shot well in the movie, so it can be exciting even though you're not necessarily rooting for these characters or even give a shit. But in the comic books, it's just people going off in weird random directions into inky blackness or very minimal backgrounds. And as I'm reading through it, I was like, wouldn't it have been funny if they'd done something like Family Circus, like a Bill Keane thing, where you've got like the little dots and showing all the guys going in all different directions and crossing each other's paths and shit. It's like, I was trying to figure out how you could visually represent what they were doing in the movie and have that work. And that amused me, but I don't know how you would do it, but this wasn't the way to do it for certain. You know, it's just, I could not recommend the adaptation to anybody. If you're a fan of the movie, if you hate the movie, there's no reason to bother with the comic book adaptation, which kind of gets me to the Daly special. You know, you're the one who got this started, or I guess you took it from Ryan and then continued it. This is almost like a thought experiment. Like, number one, is there a page here that you would want? Like, just period. Like, I'm thinking, like, you know how you go to a convention, you'll be going through the books and you'll see all these different pages for all these different prices. Like, for starters, would you pay $50 for a single page in this book?
It depends on the page. But,
so you'd go $50 on one of these?
But it would have to be. Well, one, I think probably like the key, like if you're gonna be, I'm trying to think of the right word to say. If you were gonna be pragmatic about it, or I don't know, Machiavellian about it, right? Like I think I hesitate to say I would buy anything from this, but if I was gonna buy something from this, it would probably, I would go for a cover, not the interior, right?
And obviously that's not an option. It's an interior page,
but
and it's a single interior page because there are a few double page spreads, but it's got to be a single page.
And excluding double page spreads too. I think I would, if I was gonna do something, it would, I don't know, man. Like, it probably would have to be a page with either an alien on it, or like maybe because I like Charles Dutton so much, like maybe, but it doesn't.
If you like
look
Charles Dutton, why do you want a white action figure that's been painted brown?
Yeah, see, that's why I'm trying to find something that, like, that spread where Grandpa Lannister's head that doesn't look like Grandpa Lannister gets knocked off by the tail. Like, I guess that doesn't count because it's a double page spread, but like that's not a bad. Like, I could see when the alien comes out of the ceiling. Not ceiling. It's he comes through that hospital curtain or whatever. You know, the little shower curtain, and then takes the guy out. And like in the movie, I think he picks him up and eats his head. But like in this, it's like the tail, like, I don't know, lops off his head or something like that. Like that's not horrible.
But it is funny though, because that tail whipping just shows how disposable the character was.
Yeah.
It was already a pivotal moment in the movie because this is like the one guy that's turned up in this whole thing that you kind of like, and then he even sleeps with Ripley, so you feel like there's going to be a romance. Maybe this is the new Hicks, and then it's like almost immediately afterwards post-coital assassination of this guy. But at least it's a moment that they build up. Where with this, it's just the tail whips and the head's gone, and that's all there is to it. So it's like, okay, well that guy just went right into the fucking trash can.
I think honestly, if DPSs aren't an option, then I would not buy any pages from this.
Right. And see, the thing is, you mentioned too the alien, right? Like, oh, I'll get a page with the alien, but the alien isn't on model, right? It all looks like an underdeveloped swimming alien from the beginning, where it's a little too smooth and it doesn't quite look like a drone is supposed to look. So it looks like a brood or some sort of like off-model knockoff of the alien instead of the actual alien itself, just tweaked enough to where you can get away with it, right?
Maybe you know what. I'll do this. If it was $50, if it was $50 and I could get the page where he comes out and he's all fucking melty after they drop the fucking hot acid, whatever the fuck it is on him.
Molten lead, isn't it?
Molten lead, yeah. If I could get the molten lead page, like all the panels around it look like crap, but that one page of the alien coming out after getting hit with the molten lead is kind of cool.
And I, specifically with you in mind, I made a point of trying to pick something out, and I figured it'd either be one of the last pages from the first issue where the drone attacks the prisoners and it's mostly just the alien, or the first page of the second issue where it's Ripley digging through the trash and finding Bishop. It might have been the 2 to 3 rather than 1 to 2. I don't remember exactly. But if I had to, if you twist my arm where I have to pick one, it'd probably be one of those two. But that's when I started on this thought experiment, because like there's not a single page in this book I'd pay $50 for, unless it was like a gift. Like, okay, now I know if I run across the molten lead page, I'll buy that for you for $50 and I'll give it to you. Okay, but I'm not buying it for myself.
The way things are going, you're not going to find anything for $50.
Right. That is what. I'll go even deeper for you. Okay.
In this thought experiment, yes, so I would totally pay.
$50 page, it's a $10 page, and I'd have a much harder time saying no to a $10 page, right? So let's say they have most of an issue for like $20 a page, so you could get most of the issue for a few $100. Do you think you'd do that?
You mean like buy an entire issue?
Yeah, like you're having to spend a few $100 and you'd be able to get an entire issue.
Not of this,
right? And okay, so let's say it's $10 a page, and let's say they have pretty much the entire miniseries, like all 3 issues. You own the entire miniseries for approximately $600 to $1,200, somewhere in that realm.
Do you have to buy the whole issue?
Well, that's the thing. Would you? Because why would you cherry pick though? Like it would.
No. I'm saying if to me, I think if you're in fantasy land where art is $10 a page, I will pay $20 for some of those double page splashes just for the notoriety of saying I have a few more DPSs. Like that's it.
And see, that's the thing though, because I went deep with this thought experiment while I was doing it to myself. But let's say it's a complete set. Let's say they have you have to no, not that you have to. This is part of the experiment.
Okay.
You know that it's a complete set. It's right there, but the guy will break up the set for you. Do you feel okay with buying those 2-page spreads at $50, for instance, for the 2-page spread, and breaking up a complete set that somebody else could buy down the line?
Oh, you mean
putting the zero in his X square.
I'm effing over future people.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I see if I really liked it, then it wouldn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like I would just break up the set. But I don't know that I like this enough to like this seems like if somebody other than me really liked this, I would rather they have it.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
And here's one more for you. The entire miniseries art is $500, but you're missing like 7 pages total out of the entire miniseries. Do you pay the $500, get the majority of the pages, and then know that in the future you're going to have to go find those pages to finish your set? Do you buy it for $500 for a 3-issue miniseries original artwork?
Well, there's a couple other approaches too. Like in those examples, the covers are never a factor, right? It's just the pages.
No covers. You're not getting an Arthur Saddam painted cover in the slot.
Right. Okay. None of that. It's just the art. And then the only other thing that you might want to consider is I think anything under like $500 is a non-risk. Like, so if you're willing to take a non-risk, like even if you buy it for $10, you might be able to sell it to somebody else for $20. So you might think of it in the sense that you buy it and then you flip it. But I don't know. I wouldn't do any of that.
Actually, I've experienced this personally. So we went on a trip to Japan, and while we were in Japan, I was trying to find original manga art. I figured, these guys are generating tons of artwork. There's probably a lot of stuff floating around there. And I went to all kinds of places, and you could find things like original cells, but it was seemingly impossible for the most part to find original art, despite how much of it is produced. And then finally, we found this one little hole-in-the-wall place. And these people had little boxes with entire stories in them, right? You could buy the entire stories for several hundred, so many thousands of yen, probably equivalent to like $600 or so. Really the kind of price range I'm talking about here. And of course, the first time I'm going there, because I'm not able to actually get the pages and inspect the pages and stuff, I'm scared because I'm thinking there's a language barrier. I don't know their production model necessarily all that well. Am I buying a bunch of fucking stats for $500?
Right.
There's a lot of if it's so cheap, then why is it so cheap? Do the alarm bells go off just because it's like too good of a deal kind of thing? And so what I ended up doing was I just bought a few pieces that I bought a piece, if I recall correctly the first time. I bought a piece that I was like, okay, this isn't too expensive. I like this. Hopefully I'm getting what I'm paying for. And so I bought it and I take it back to the hotel room and I inspect it and I realized this is clearly an original piece of art. They've clearly laid zipatone on this and the marker lines are all there. And it's like, okay, I know for a fact that this is an original piece of artwork, handcrafted. So we go through all the trouble to go back to this store one more time, and I bought several other pieces because I bought some pieces on the cheap to give as gifts and stuff to people. Got another by the artist I really liked, and of course I still have remorse because there were a few more pieces I'd like to have gotten, but I always think too, is there were entire stories that I could have gotten for like $600, and that was my shot because I'm never going back to Japan again, right?
Right.
And it's like putting myself in that situation, but for this comic, I'm still okay. I'm still good with giving it a pass. Somebody out there wants that more than me. Those take up a lot of space. 66 pages of original art takes up a lot of fucking space. And I'd feel compelled to present it in some fashion or at least put it in a book or something. I don't want to have to fucking put that shit in the sleeves.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Even in your analogy, even if it's like $10 a page, you probably end up paying more for the the Mylars and the portfolios to put it in, right?
So yeah, it's like the future expense. Again, if you got an incomplete one, then you're gonna have to go out there and spend hundreds of dollars to try to finish the set because you got to finish a set because that'll be the only time you ever own an entire miniseries. But it's this. It's too. I don't want to have responsibility. I don't want to have to deal with that.
If anybody's listening, you know what you really should do that we haven't talked about? You should take the deal. You should buy all the issues. You should take it to another art dealer and trade all that shit in, and then get something that you really want.
Get one of the Saddam covers for the entire miniseries.
Right, or whatever
plus
it
X
comes
number
out
of hundreds
to.
of dollars.
Yeah. Whatever.
It's not going to be even swap still.
Right, and let those guys deal with the churn.
Right. But now speaking of the cover, this is another problem I have with this miniseries is that I really don't like that first issue cover, and I realize you can kind of rationalize it that it's the alien going into the molten lead or something, but really it's not that. It's just a shitty basic whirlwind maelstrom around the upper portion of an alien. The second one is just a generic alien cover, and again, we know that this is a different alien in this movie. The whole point is that it's coming out of something beside a human. It has different characteristics, different ways of moving. It's still the basic model alien throughout all these covers. The only one of these covers I even like is the third one, and I mostly like it because it's doing the whole reaching out and grabbing somebody from behind that we got from the first movie, and also the alignment of alien heads reminds me a lot of that really great Glenn Fabry cover from John Constantine, where it's like all the different heads, and then John's going boo at you, basically. That's the only cover of the series I even like anyway. I don't even care for the other two covers, to be honest with you.
I kept looking at that third cover because I like I said, one, I don't think I had ever seen the second and third covers. I think for me, it's funny, right? Like I don't like Alien 3. I don't like the interior art very much. Like there's something weird about since you've owned a comic, you have a weird attachment to it. Like I know that I get what you're saying about the first cover, that it's just some shit over the top of an alien body. But I think if I saw that come up for sale, it depends on how much it is, but it would be one of those things where I'd be like, ooh, I don't know why. Mainly because I owned it at one point, right? So I think that would just be me going, ooh, I don't think the other covers are terrible. I guess I get what you're saying. That second cover is kind of generic or whatever, but still, I think I like most of the covers, but I get why you're most attracted to the cover of the third issue, because that is very there's something primordial about it, and it does kind of evoke the original design and stuff like that. I don't know. There's something about it that just is very compelling. So I get why that's your favorite of the bunch, and I think that's a legitimate a legitimate praise of the three covers.
But I also see your perspective, because I did see that Alien 3 cover a bunch, and I definitely remember it very strongly from that time period. I don't know if I knew somebody who owned it or what.
That's the book that sold to everybody.
Right,
I was
right.
like, fuck this shit.
Yeah,
I was
the
like,
rest of
fuck that thing.
The rest of them are in the landfill next to the ET cartridges.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Excerpt from the August 1992 cover dated Fangoria magazine, number 115. The article Alien 3: The Final Invasion by Daniel Schweiger. They helped to create every Stan Winston monster, from Pumpkinhead to the Terminator, but Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. would only encounter the real Hollywood beasts after they opened their own FX shop. Though the duo had faced demanding challenges on Aliens, James Cameron's legendary perfectionism paled before the studio machinations on the next big money sequel, controlled by video wunderkind David Fincher. The Creature Shop also had to build an alien for Fincher to wear, as the filmmaker claimed that he had to be inside the beast to direct it. Determined to make Alien 3 his own, the 29-year-old first-time feature director also decided not to use any props from Cameron's film, his absolute stylism leading him to scrap and personally reshoot all of the second unit footage. He's the most perfectionistic filmmaker we've ever worked with, Woodruff comments. Fincher's an auteur like Stanley Kubrick, and had to feel everything to realize his vision. We ran up a suit so David could learn how I moved inside the costume, so I was being directed by another alien with a bullhorn. Sigourney's interest in the alien really inspired me, Woodruff enthuses. She'd come over to our shop and comment on the effects. Then when I was suited up, Sigourney would talk about my character. No other actress I've worked with has tried so hard to integrate my creature performance into her role. Sigourney had to believe the alien was a character instead of some guy in a rubber suit. Ripley has respect for the monster, because only she knows what it's truly capable of. But while she's bitter about all the grief the alien has caused, I don't know if you could call Ripley vengeful. She only wants to eradicate any chance of it being taken back to Earth. Woodruff and Gillis are quick to support Ripley's franchise-ending death, her Terminator-like plunge replacing a planned scene of a chestburster hatching from the character before she falls. You could say it's weak for the main character to commit suicide, but Ripley would be even weaker if she succumbed to the temptation of a normal life without considering the consequences. This is her last bit of power over the creature, and it's great that the studios invested $50 million and a major star into something this unconventional. The obvious thing for Alien 3 would be to say, hey, Aliens worked, let's make this one a big shoot 'em up. We'll even get Jesse Ventura to really kick butt, but it was better this way. There are a lot of subtleties to this film, and I don't know if fans want that from an Alien picture, Gillis adds, but Alien 3 does have a feeling that's lacking in recent horror films. They're severely wimpy these days, and nothing is scary. You have Jason and Freddy, and all that bullshit is a cartoonish exercise in gore. Alien 3 might not be the most terrifying thing in the world, but it's brutal and dark, and challenges what people expect out of a horror film. Woodruff and Gillis credit their personal satisfaction with Alien 3 to Fincher, whose relentless perfectionism has brought some outcries from Hollywood, especially after he attempted to remove any references to aliens, a decision that was quickly vetoed when 20th Century Fox insisted on using the Sulaco model for the shuttle's ejection. As eccentric as David is, we'd work with him anytime, Gillis says. He's as independent a filmmaker as James Cameron, and he wasn't slamming him by not wanting to use the aliens' effects. David just wanted to make this his own picture. Overall, we're pleased with the way he's made Alien 3. There's been a lot of bad press about David, which is the same thing that happened to Cameron because of his logistically complicated directing. The movie industry would be better if there was more support from the media, instead of them always looking for an angle. It would really be a stretch if the Aliens films continued, Gillis says. This has such a conclusive ending that they'd only be able to make a sequel with contrivances like showing Ripley hanging from the lead mold or having the company clone her.
Again, I didn't want to make this a referendum on Alien 3, but I've alluded to this in the past as well. I'm watching Alien 3 on television, I want to say on UHF, and I want to say probably the early 2000s. I do not own this movie, of course, in this time period. I'm just watching it on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, right? And I don't even think I get in from the beginning. I think I get in partway through, and I start watching it, and it draws me in. And I start to see, as when the movie came out, when the movie first came out, probably one of the best comparisons I can make is that I'd gotten into Freddy Krueger in the late 80s. And I'd started with Nightmare 2, Freddy's Revenge. The first one I saw in the theater was Dream Warriors, which is arguably the best of the movies. Usually it comes down to either the original Nightmare or Dream Warriors, which of the two is the best of that entire franchise. I come down the Dream Warriors side, by the way. And then when I go to see 4, very much a horror movie trope, goes back to at least released Friday the 13th Part 2, where the hero and survivor of the first movie is whacked within the first first few minutes, really, like almost like a James Bond pre-title sequence. They get rid of the guys who survived the last time, the people you were rooting for the last time, and they start all over again. And usually I don't care. But Dream Warriors was such a great nightmare movie. And of course, they brought back the lead character from the first movie, and that she dies heroically in the end of the movie. And so it just felt emotionally impactful. And I think that, not unlike Aliens, I think a lot of horror fans imprinted upon the survivors of Dream Warriors in a similar fashion as we imprinted upon Newt, Ripley, Hicks. And then, of course, these guys, throughout the first act of the sequel, the fourth movie, they're killed off, and they're introduced to a whole new group of characters who, frankly, I think are vastly inferior to the Dream Warriors, and of course are nowhere near as effective because they're not Dream Warriors. They're the assholes that Freddy's going to kill this time. And then that kind of marks that was the peak of Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that was the movie that made the most money, and the decline starts with 5. But I think a lot of it was that people love the Dream Warriors. They're doing a Dream Warriors reunion in Dallas in a few weeks, and I think that people are going to show up for the Dream Warriors reunion. I don't think anybody's going to show up for the fucking Dream Child reunion, or any shit like that, right? And I'd already experienced that, but of course I didn't care about those characters as much. It was just a real bummer to watch these cool characters die and then have them replaced with a bunch of shitty characters. And then they do that with Alien, and it's like, you motherfuckers, I love these people. How dare you do this? But like, better part of a decade on, watching the movie again, knowing what was going to happen, I once again, the Charles Dance character, the Doctor character, I really liked that guy. I liked the relationship he has with Ripley. I like how they're basically co-conspirators, where he knows shit's up, everybody knows shit's up with her, but he likes her, and it's very much kind of like the Hicks dynamic, where not everybody's on Ripley's side at the beginning of the movie. It takes a while before people start to side with her, but it seems like Hicks sees something in her almost immediately and is there to support her throughout the movie, and you love that about him because she's your girl, she's your heroine, and you want somebody to have her back, and he's the first guy to recognize her for that regard. And the same thing happens with Alien 3, and I like this guy, and then when he gets killed again, I'm like, fuck, man, why did they do that? He was so cool, but also the fact was that was the one character where it did matter to me that he died, and I was bummed up that he died watching it again. And I've watched it several times since then, and like with you, I did, I believe it was I don't know if I saw it before the quadrilogy, the much maligned quadrilogy just by name alone. I don't know if I've seen it before the Aliens reunion in 2016 or not, but having seen the not director's cut, the extended cut, whatever you want to call it, I think that was a vastly superior movie to the one that was released in theaters, and I could see more and more of what they were trying to do with that movie, and they literally would seem like they were going after the audience. They literally seemed like it was like, I'm not going to try to top Alien and Aliens. I'm going to do my own thing, and the thing I'm doing is fucking ending this franchise. And you know how it is, again, but with a Nightmare, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies just kept going on and on and on, and you're up to 6, and 6 sucked, but at least it was a conclusion to the story, and then you get new Nightmares, like, oh shit, here we go again. It just never seems to end with any of these franchises. And given that these were cinematic landmarks, these were great films, arguably among the best films, the kind of movies that deserve to be in the vaults, studied for the ages, Alien and Aliens, and having the pressure of making the third part of that trilogy, I can understand the desire to make it something complete. And the fact is, you can see where you could go from Alien to Aliens. You can see where, okay, well, this was more of the horror, this is more insular, this was a smaller cast, now we're going to expand it, we're going to make it bigger, it's going to be a movie for the 80s, and you can see where that works. It makes sense. That arc is something that obviously people appreciate because those are both beloved movies, and there's a bunch of argument between which one is better, Alien or Aliens. And of course, everybody shits on Alien 3. But I think that it almost like they went in there with the goal of making sure that this was going to be the finale, this is going to be the end of this franchise. And if you're looking at it with artistic integrity, if you're looking at it for how do we make this a closed circle, it actually makes a lot of sense to me that, Ripley leaves that second movie in a hopeful place with their new surrogate family and everything else, and then you just fucking gut punch everybody at the beginning of the movie. No, she's not. The kid's dead. The boyfriend's dead. The alien is inside of her and she's going to fucking die. I know that they intentionally structured the movie to reflect Kubler-Ross stages of death, stages of acceptance, where you're going from denial to grief to anger and all that kind of stuff. Ripley goes through that throughout the movie. The movie's about the acceptance of her final fate. I remember quoting Simon Bisley a while back where he was mad that Aliens didn't portray the alien correctly, because in the first movie this thing is just pure death, and anything that gets in the way is going to die, and there's no way you could kill these guys by the dozens because they're just too fearsome. They almost like are the manifestation of death itself coming to get you, and that inevitability. And Alien 3 is about that. It's about returning the aliens to that primal force of nature, that the implacable foe that's going to get us all inevitably, and the recognition. It's a movie almost about like having a terminal disease or something. It's like she knows by the midpoint of this movie that she's going to die, and she's going through all this stuff to accept that, to get to the final place where she knows that the only way that she can make her life matter is to end it, to make sure that there isn't another alien queen, that as far as she knows, they've killed all the aliens that are in existence. She's got the only one left inside of her, and she's going to take it with her as she goes into the molten lead. The Christ symbolism doesn't do much for me, although it's far worse when the chest burster starts coming out and she cradles it, and I definitely think that's a Sigourney thing, and that was not a good idea. That was fairly dumb. But the arc of the movie makes sense to me, and I do think that it is a masterful arc. I think that the Alien franchise ends effectively with Alien 3, and it forms a full picture. It's not the ending that you want. It's not the happy ending. It's not the crowd-pleasing ending. It was a terrible idea if you're wanting to make an endless franchise, and they were still very much in the mindset, we're going to do 4, 5, 6. This is just the end of Ripley's story, that kind of shit, before everybody got really mad at them and they had to take a break and everything. But this was, I honestly, I'm not willing to say masterpiece, because obviously this is such a flawed movie and has so many problems, and it's not a fully realized movie, and everybody agrees with that, and that's why Fincher doesn't even talk about this movie. But you can see the director he's going to become. You can see the vision in that movie. It's amazing that it's as good as it is given the circumstances. And I found I not only do I fully embrace Alien 3 at this point, but if you're asking me to rank them, it's Aliens, Alien 3, and then Alien. I just think it's a more substantial movie, and the bleakness and the ballsiness of that movie, again, like you say, you can't throw a bunch of jokes and make this a lighthearted movie. It's just not that. It's super fucking dark, but I think it earns it in a way that a lot of these other movies that try to do that don't. It's a movie about death. It's a movie about trauma. It's a movie about horrors and just finding yourself in progressively worse situations. We talked before about how I don't see how Ripley carries on as a franchise heroine, because she's not Rambo. She's not somebody who's going to be inevitably drawn back to the aliens again. At the end of Aliens, she has her family. She's got her resolution. She should be done. The way that I think her story ends, if you want the happy version, if you want to go back to Brazil where he runs off with the gal at the end, is that she goes off with her surrogate family and they live happily ever after, and they never have a fucking thing to do with the aliens again. That's the way you want that story to end. But it's a trilogy. We're all stuck on, we got to do the third movie. We got to finish the story. We can't have a duology. If you're doing the third movie, I think that this is the movie that they needed to make, given the themes of the franchise and given the arc of the character and given the natural inclinations of that character. I don't think there's another way you can do it besides everything's fucked and she dies. That's one of the things that's so heartbreaking about Alien Resurrection, is that they just won't let Ripley go. Her story ends effectively with 3. I think that it's a good ending, and I wish they left it alone, but I also completely understand hating the movie. I completely understand the emotional betrayal of that movie and how hurtful that movie is. I just think that it is artful, and I now see it as a movie that I respect and have a love for now.
So you're a Fincher stan.
Yeah. No, I'm not actually a huge Fincher guy, to be honest with you. I like some of his movies. I've never been as one of her. I know you're just fucking with me, but just to put it out there, I'm not. It's hard for me to be a stan of anybody because I'm such a hypercritical mega bitch that like I'll find the 1 or 2 movies that I love from somebody, and then the rest of them I'll slag on. So most of the Fincher stuff I'm not necessarily drawn to, but I respect him as a filmmaker, and I think he does consistently good movies. They don't necessarily all speak to me, but I do respect the guy.
Like I guess when you were talking about the finality and how you thought that was the only way this kind of arc could end, then how do you feel about the concept? Like remember how they were consistently debating the end of the original Alien, and there was that talk of like, instead of Ripley getting in her cryopod and just being like, I'm the last survivor of the Nostromo, signing off, like they were gonna do a thing where there was still another fucking alien and it ate her fucking face, and that was the end of the movie.
I'm really glad they didn't do that, because I think that it's a vastly more interesting arc for her to have that heroine's journey, and maybe it comes to a sad ending, but she's still a heroine in the end. She still ends the threat of the alien at the sacrifice of not only her physical life, but also her life story as well, because she's already lost her daughter to the cryo sleep. She's lost everybody she's loved over the course of this thing. I think by the end she's welcoming that end, because she can't do it again. She can't start over again. She's been through too much. She's too traumatized. But they do offer that glimmer of hope. We'll get it out of you. We'll save you. And she knows better. And so even though most of us would at least think twice about maybe it's worth it, at least I'll live, but knowing what it meant for her to live, she recognized that she had to die and she had to take this thing with her. So if she'd have died at the end of Alien, I honestly, it would have kind of been corny. You would think that it's, oh, you're so dark, nobody survives. Like, no, it's so, honestly, it's so much darker to have her go through that whole arc where you have all this hope and you have all this fun and you have all these cool adventures, and then she still fucking ends up basically in that same place where ultimately she still gets killed. But it's so much more enriching by having her having the journey before then. It would have been lame. Oh, she died, dude. No, I'm glad they didn't go that way. Build up to the punchline. I think that screws up the punchline if you do it too soon.
Okay. I guess I just can't get past, it seems like you're good with, Alien, and then Aliens, you wanted that for her to go on that journey, but it seems like you've made your peace with how it conceivably, quote unquote, ends in Alien 3, right? But like, it doesn't, that ending doesn't color the journey. Like I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around, it's like, to me, I just thought, like, I get what you're saying. If they had chosen to, quote unquote, end it, then she goes off, she lives happily ever after, and that's the fucking end of it or whatever. But like, since they bring her back, once you make that decision, then you feel like that's the only way you can see it ending, right? Like that's kind of how you made your peace with it, or I don't know.
It's sort of like, again, you can do this in anything in life. Like, you have a relationship and it ends, and in the end it's ugly and you're mad at each other and you have all these problems, and there's a part of you that wish you'd never gotten together. But would you just never have had that relationship, or do you take what you learned from that relationship and do better the next time? What the futility of life itself. We're all going to die. So what was the point of doing any of this shit in the first place if we're all going to die anyway? I think it's one of the reasons why I think it's something of a minor masterpiece is that the movie itself forced you to go through Kubler-Ross. I feel like I got through that movie and I recognized that, okay, this is just how it is. She's not going to make it. Hicks isn't going to make it. Newt isn't going to make it. That's not the way I wanted it for them. I wanted different things for them, but I'm not sorry that I went on the journey with them in Aliens. It doesn't negate it. Yeah, it sucks that they didn't have a happy ending, but they had some happiness. They had some love. They had some enjoyment of the experiences they had together. That's why they became a family in the first place. It's horrible that it ended the way that it does, but go into the Blade Runner thing, it's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does? Does that mean you don't go off with the android you fall in love with because she's just going to die anyway? No, you go off and you do your thing because you're invested, you love this person, and they're inevitably going to end. All of our lives are going to end eventually. So it's like, I think that the movie itself forces you into a position where you have to go through Kubler-Ross. So I think that it's actually, again, that's why I see it as a piece of art. You don't want that to be what happens, but that is what happened. It's not the story you wanted to have happen, but I think the whole point of the movie is to go through the process of the grief of things not turning out the way you wanted them to be. So not only is it an interesting film, at minimum, it's an interesting film, even if you hate it. I think it does things that you would not expect to be done in the movie. But also, I think if you watch it with the right mindset, you recognize that it's walking you through your grief over things not having turned out the way you wanted them to after the first two movies. It's like an art installation. It's like, it's not just cinema, but it's something that's actually supposed to have an impact on you psychologically that could potentially be beneficial. It can help you to move past a lot of shit that would impact you in real life, where it's like, well, that happened, but I've got to move past that. I think it's a fucked up, healthy movie. I think if you can take the lesson of Alien 3, it's actually beneficial to life and perspective in life.
I guess I don't know if I'm just raging against against the machine. Like for me, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's weird because I feel like there's something I can quantify, but it's like it's interesting because it doesn't. You don't have to be jokey. Well, I guess this is what I'll say. Just because you're jokey doesn't mean you don't respect the material, and just because you're serious doesn't mean you respect the material. I feel like the Warriors 3 and Newton Hicks were both taken out callously. I think your vantage point is that at least Ripley is spending the entire movie supposedly processing that, thus, whereas, in Ragnarok, they don't even fucking care, right? Like, and I sort of, I can see that, but there's something to me, though, about the symbolic nature of those, what you were calling like the parasocial relationship, the symbolic nature of the characters and how they mean more, I think, than people acknowledge, and sometimes, regardless of whether it's horror or what you expect, I think there probably was a way to have her die, but I don't know. There's something about the whole exercise that seemed to me, very uncomfortable and just not. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's all backseat driving. It's just it's me just thinking that's not how. Even if you knew at the beginning the end goal was that this is the death of Ripley, like I think I would have gone about it in another way. Like it's kind of like when people. I remember when people were reacting to the death of Superman, like the comic and everything, and I forget who said it, but like they had like creator reactions and Wizard or whatever, and some people are like, oh, this is fucking awesome. Some people are like, oh, this and that and the other thing, and I forget who it was, but he's like, oh man, the death of Superman should be fucking epic. It shouldn't just be two guys smacking each other and they fucking fall over and die and you have a funeral. Like when Superman dies, the fucking clouds should open up. It should be fucking raining like Noah's fucking flood, and just it should just be earth shattering, and the birds will stop singing, and the fucking it'll
be does my heart go on beating,
like I don't know, but I found that an interesting comment, right? And it's like different people react differently to how those symbolic characters, even in death, right? Like you have a certain set of expectations, like, and I think that's, I don't know, for me that's what it comes down to. It's just regardless of if that's the end point, it's like the execution of it was not to my liking.
And that's just it. And that's why I see Alien 3 as a work of art, is that I think that these are valid views. I think that my view is valid, but I also think that your view is valid, that you can see it as inadequate, you can see it as inept, you can see it as inappropriate, and that's still all valid. They could have done this better, or they could have done it differently to where you could tell a similar story without it being so distasteful to you, or to do it in a way that is more overtly healthy and a better charting of that journey and stuff. But also, there's my perspective where it's like, well, sometimes shit's just fucked and things don't turn out the way. Sometimes you're burying Superman, it's a sunny day and kids are playing, off in the distance. You're like, how can you be doing this? Superman's dead. How can you be playing? Art is going to be seen by different people different ways, and I think that Alien 3 does that in a way that most of the other Alien movies don't. I don't think that there's going to be anybody having a 3-hour discussion about AVP Requiem. It's like right? It's like, you may hate it, but it's provocative.
I could at least talk for a good hour about that horrible scene in the maternity ward, but and how much I find that distasteful. But
well, I actually, again, I had that conversation with Shag, and I had to stop him because that's the only Alien movie I've never seen is AVP Requiem, and it's like, well, I'm going to probably watch it someday. And he's like, well, I could come home for that. It's like, no, that was during the time period where they weren't doing comic books. I'm not doing a movie podcast. I'm doing a comic podcast. But yeah, one of these days I am going to see Requiem. But he said the same thing, that basically the only reason to see the movie is because how fucked up it is and wrong-headed it is.
Yeah. Wow.
And again, I've heard from both camps. I've heard from the people who are like, it rocks because it's just this gory, horrible movie. And I've heard people where it's like, why would you watch that? It's just this gory, horrible movie. So and I'll see it and I'll eventually and I'll come to my own conclusions, but nobody's calling it art.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, that director didn't go on to do anything else, I'm sure. Shit, have we resolved this? Is that the end?
I think it feels pretty resolved. Does it feel resolved to you? The only other thing so. I could think of was, Ripley going out like that is no spaceship battle Yamato. All those fuckers get killed, but I feel hamstrings tugged every time I watch those guys go out. But when I see Ripley go out, I'm just kind of like, it doesn't. I don't know how to quantify that, but it just there's something where it feels like more nihilistic than honorable, and I just had wished if she was going to go out that I would have felt those that kind of bittersweet, but you're like, oh, I get what they're doing, like I understand the sacrifice, and I think I don't know that I ever got the magnitude of what she was doing, because it's like, if that's the case, then just let somebody rape you and kill you at the beginning and be done with it, I don't know, but whatever.
And my argument would be that we kind of already got that movie with Aliens. We could have made the third movie Rogue One, and this time they all die, but you're kind of doing the same thing if you go that route. If you have the grand finale where they fight off and we're not going to make it and we have our epic struggle, but if we don't go through the journey, we don't get Aliens, and Aliens is wonderful. So why wouldn't we want to go on the journey, even if it comes to the bad end? So we can go back and forth forever, though. And again, that's what I think a great piece of art does, is there is an argument to be had for, well, why bother with it? If life sucks, why am I even going to bother continuing on with that? And that's a perspective that some people have, and a lot of those people don't make it in the end too. So it's like it's part of the eternal argument. It's a part of the eternal debate about life itself. And if a movie can get you to a place where you're thinking about things in that sort of philosophical or even theological mindset, but at the same time, like you said, you feel that the movie trivializes trauma as well and is too cavalier with these very heavy themes, and that's completely valid. But again, that's art then. The fact that we're going to have that conversation, be going back and forth, and I'll make a point, you make a point, and that's a valuable piece of work then. Even if you hate it, and it's like, but at least there's actual themes there that you have to grapple with. It's like there's something to it. It's not just a Mick movie. Yeah.
I always thought that the creative process that put it together was pretty fascinating too. Just the one thing I definitely agree with is the fact that Fincher was able to make the movie as good as it was with all the cooks in the kitchen, like that. I can see that. Like, that's pretty, there's something to that where that's a feat, right? Like, so.
This is, they really need to do like a Heart of Darkness for this movie at some point. There aren't a lot of movies that went through this movie, what this movie went through, and came out as anything on the other side of it, but it didn't become Apocalypse Now either, so it's like the degree to which is successful at going through all the trauma of the making of the movie, and the result of that is definitely highly debatable as well.
Although you could write up your little thesis on Marlon Brando as Kurtz and Sigourney Weaver in the third movie, and how they're both bald headed or some shit, right? That'll be your thesis, your college term paper, Kurtz and Ripley, both bald, nihilistic whatevers, something. But I think I'm tapped out.
Everybody's talked about your hair to death, although I thought it was extremely appropriate. Was that liberating finally to shave your head?
I guess it was. I think most actors sort of love to be asked to do something extreme. Fox was a little worried that if I shaved my head, I'd be so ugly no one would be able to watch the movie. But we went ahead and did it anyway.
Would they have liked you to have done Aliens 4?
I think no one takes that for granted. We'll see what happens with this one, and I hope they do make other Aliens, because I think it's such a wonderful opportunity for directors to sort of make a whole world happen for people.
Would you come back and play her again?
If there was an original script, I would not say no, but I just felt that it was unfair to the series and to myself, perhaps, to do something that was ever going to ride on the coattails of the one before. And the longer you do them, the more chance there is of repeating yourself, I think.
On Tumblr, we were liked by I Have Become Mistake Alien, but our gravy's still on Twitter, where we were noted by a very, very tired old man, 21st Century Boys, Between the Pages blog, Bill at Spy of Vinyl, Billy Hines, who added another great Aliens comics show, Just What the Doctor Ordered, CH, Cactus Comics and Cinema, Chris A. Field, Otherverse Games, Chris Dunford, who added I loved Gibson's take on this, Chris Lydon, The Comic Crush, Dario Pastore, Dear Watchers, a Marvel What If podcast, Del Dracula, Jaume Olivera, Doc Strange, Dirk Ashton, Ed Moore, El Coleccionista de Comics, Etrigan the Demon, History of Comics on Film, I Was Joe Is, Jeffrey Brown They Them, Keith G. Baker, King Dinosaur, Kirk Spencer, Demented Old Circus Monkey, Lamar the Revenger, Mark Wilkins, Mike at Send Aliens to Me, Ryan Daly, Siskoid, Tomas Corsi, Wayne Burrows, Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace podcast, and Zendao 42.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.
Coming in June, Aliens, Predator, the deadliest of the species.